everyone, it's UnkleDestiny here with you. It's time to do the New Year's reading. So we're going to see what the overall year of 2019 has for us. Now this is going to be broad surface. It's not going to be anything very specific and more detailed. We may briefly go into, but you want to look at the readings that come out for the year each month to see what is much more the bigger overall energy for that period of time. So again, this is a large snapshot of the entire year, not broken down into individual month. See the individual readings for each month for that. So let's see what the ancestors and all the spirits have to say. All right, here we go. This is what we got for the year of 2019. An interesting spread, because we got sort of this pinwheel spoked aspect here. But what I'm drawn and first and foremost to begin with is what we got with the dice, which was a number 1. Turn that so it's a little easier to read. We got the number 1. Now, number 1 deals with the self, appearance, first impressions, beginnings, and your attitude. So first and foremost, the thing that will be most important to focus on in 2019 are those aspects of understanding who you are. What is that sense of self about? Do you recognize that you are enough? Or do you recognize that there are things that can be improved and you are ready to spend that energy improving them, but ultimately still from the standpoint that you are enough? Appearances and first impressions. So it's going to be very much a year of reevaluating the appearances. Do we dress in clothing that fits our bodies? Do we dress in clothing that is comfortable for us and still allows us to have life, but also represents our age? Do we deal with the aspects of the first impressions that we have had both on people and of people? And the beginnings that we're having. Because any first impression is also part of a beginning. It's part of how do we look at them and how we're going to interact with them. If we're, especially in this case, we're looking at this as being the reading for the entire year of 2019, it's going to be about how do we approach this year and the attitude, which is one of the aspects that we have with this. Are we looking at this new year of 2019 as something that can be better, something that can be wiser, but also something that we can resolve to deal with the shadow elements of the previous year? Because this 2018 has been filled with a lot of things that have been brought up, a lot of muck, a lot of ill, a lot of arrogance, a lot of ego. So we need to look at those attitudes and develop them further. We need to be able to see and look at them and see how those have had an impression on others, and most of all important, how they've had an impression about our view of self. And how can we make that and operate from the place of it being healthier, of a place where we are trying to heal from, a place that we are trying to see those around us also operate and be better from. Because essentially, no matter what, we have to be able to heal ourselves and for ourselves as opposed to healing for others. All right? So our other pieces, we have the copper piece here, again, which is all in the support area. And what I see with this one is that spirit is, we've got this broken bone, this sort of wishbone shaped one here, as well as support. And spirit is definitely going to be very supportive in this next year. And you see we've also got the broken rib bone that looks kind of like a cane. So there's, again, that support, that crutch, that ability to stand. And then we have over here the the spinal bone, the one that I sometimes look at for the top of the bone or also the pelvic bone. This also, again, is not an element of support, but this is also this element that I'm seeing about being open and creating more. So there's going to be a lot more intellect coming up, but there's also going to be a lot more emotion. But unlike this last year that had a lot of the ego and destructive emotion, I think there's going to be a lot more of the positive emotion, that the emotions that give birth to potential and positive potential. And this goes back into the attitude we want to walk into this year with, and we want to have for this year, is that there is positive potential to grow for everyone, not just a small few, for everyone. And there's some of what we see with some of the balancing bones that are nearby, and especially around this one. So let's go look at the pinwheel for a moment. So this is our social one. And we've also got the crystal piece here. And the crystal, as it is looking at our social standpoint, again, we're looking at memory. We're looking at the decisions of the past. We're looking at the thoughts. And those have to really be focused around how can we be positive? How can we generate, again, for the all, as opposed to the few? And recognize that the all also means that there's going to be differences. There's going to be differences, but there's also going to be a lot of things that are the same. And how can we operate more from the place of the same than from the place of difference? And we have to sort of break with the ideas about the differences and look at and develop and cultivate the aspects of the same. So that principle of appearances and first impressions and beginnings, instead of saying, how am I different from this person? Instead of saying, how am I like this person? How are we in the same? How are we still all working for the same thing? How are we all concerned for the same thing? Yes, we got our differences, but how can we also be the same? And that is part of the attitude and part of the first impressions and part of the appearance that we are working from, as well as that sense of self. How am I the same as this person across from me? How am I the same as this person on the other side of the world who is also just trying to scrape by and put food on the table for their families? How am I the same that if something was done negatively here to me, I would be upset and wanting everything possible done for justice, for, sadly, retribution? They are no different. They want the same things. They want to be safe. And we have to operate from the standpoint of, I am not the only one who needs to feel safe here. And that's going to be part of what that memory is going on. Now, why I also bring up this aspect of it's about how we work with the other, we also have the shell, and we've got it facing outward, and so it's the exterior. So it's a lot more of how that sense of self and sense of self of appearance is also in relationship to others. It's about that standpoint of it's a pretty color, it's a pretty shape, it's nice actions. It's again that sense of how are they the same as me, not how they are different. Because here's the thing, ego seriously focuses on just me. How am I taking care of just me? How am I different and how am I better? As opposed to how are we the same? How can we work together? So this is going to be about meeting people. It's going to be about meeting new things and new ideas. It's about developing new language as we move forward. Now these other two, they represent the divergence. And since they're coming in here from the social, they're the standpoints of where we can walk, where we walk either internally or externally. And it's given the proximity to the shell. That's why I put the aspect. This is the external, this is the internal. And the work that's got to be done, the first impressions, it's that sense of self, are going to relate both to the external as well as the internal, which is talk about the self. Now that sense of self is going to be the thing that something will happen in the year that is going to remind everyone of the idea that there's no place on this earth that doesn't get affected. We are living so much more now in a world that has never existed before in the aspect of the way we are connected to everything and everywhere. Events that have happened, which normally would have taken months, if not years, to be brought about or being known about on the other side of the world, are now happening within 5 minutes of each other, as soon as they are broadcasted. And that sense of how are we connected, both externally and internally, is going to be a big factor. The concerns about how information flows and how information is used to push us apart is part of the things that we're going to be focusing on. It's going to be what we're going to be focusing on, trying to be, again, back together and back to being the same, because there's a greater power there than when we are different. Now, some of the outer pieces we've got here. And there's always going to be natural disasters. I think I've said this on one of the previous years. There's always going to be fires, there's always going to be floods, there's always going to be storms, there's going to be earthquakes. Those are always going to be happening. Now, where I see a much more of it happening, I see it happening in Southeast Asia. I see it happening probably, and when I say Southeast Asia, I'm also including Australia in this area too. I'm seeing a number of events also happening here in the U.S. Mostly, it's going to be split between both the West and the East Coast, but there's definitely going to be something major environmentally happening in the middle of the country. I'm not sure what they're not saying, but there's going to be an environmental issue that develops somewhere in the Midwest. And again, these things are going to be, it's going to be very easy for people to say, we're different, how do I protect myself? And we can't do that. If we want to overcome this, we have to focus on how are we the same, how are we able to support each other? And that, again, is that attitude that we go into this with. If we go into this situation, this difficulty, whatever this is how is it, are we the same? How can we help each other so that we can get through this? That is what we're looking for. So this is about the reading for the year of 2018. It's really much more about the idea of us being the same, not different. About the self and making sure it's in a healthy place so that it can exist with others. About the appearances that we give. There have been a lot of things in this year of 2018 that have been about appearances and appearances that are false. And now we need to really be looking at them with substance. Not just because they're easy. Not just because they tell us the things we want to hear. I mean, that's that aspect of the first impression, because the first impression will tell us the things that we want to hear, that we desire to hear. But if we're going to begin something, we also have to look past that. And we have to have the attitude that there is more that is possible. There is more things that can happen, as opposed to this isn't going to work. We have to work from the places there is potentiality, there is possibility. I have to stretch, and I may have to be uncomfortable. And that is part of growth. That is part of introspection. So, this is Uncle Destiny on behalf of the ancestors, the Orishas, Loas, and gods. May 2019 be a year where you find what makes you like everybody else, that you see the potential, not the negative, in what can happen, and that you spend the time saying, I can be better and I can do more. Ashe.